classes. I have two Monday classes. I have an 8:45 a.m., which is the same class as this, and then a 10 o'clock a.m., which is called Journey Through the Mitzvot, where we're going through all the different mitzvot and kind of like trying to understand how it applies nowadays and what the roots are and what kind of like learning the depth of it, which we just started 10 a.m. I just started it. Yeah, we just had two classes. So in classes, absolutely. So yeah, it's you can totally just join at one session, and yeah, it's completely Monday morning
At 10?
10 a.m. Yeah. All right. The title of tonight's class is The DNA of Judaism. So if I were to ask you, what are kind of like the foundation beliefs, the foundation mitzvot, like what are the foundations of Judaism that everything else is kind of built on? What would you say?
Yeah.
The 10 Commandments.
10 Commandments, food, Torah.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
Prayer.
Okay.
One God.
Okay. So this past Shabbat, we started reading the Torah again, right? Every week there's a Torah portion of the week, and we just started reading it. So the beginning of the Torah is Bereshit, and it starts with the creation of the world. Now, the very first word of the Torah, does anyone know what the first word of the Torah is?
In the beginning.
Bereshit, in the beginning, exactly. Now, our commentators discuss this idea that the first word Bereshit sort of it's kind of like the DNA of creation, right? Like just like at conception, the fetus has the embryo has all the DNA of the human that it's going to develop into. So and everything that sort of unfolds, it's not like extra things are added on. It's really just like an unfolding of the DNA, right? So everything about that child is encoded within the DNA that's present at conception. So too, everything about creation, everything about Judaism is sort of encoded within the word Bereshit, right? And there's lots and lots of talk about the different ways you can read the word and the different ways that you can understand the word that teaches us so much about the world and Judaism. And it's interesting to note that there's a couple of ideas that really come out of this. And one of them is an idea that I think we've discussed from time to time, and it comes up quite frequently, is that the physical world is an analogy to the spiritual world, right? Just like kind of we spoke about the idea that at conception, all the DNA is present for the child. And we see the same thing in Bereshit, that everything, right? There's an energy in the beginning that contains everything that's going to later unfold. That's why, for example, when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, it's such an important time of the year because it's the beginning of the year, right? And we want to start off right. And we see this in the spiritual world, and we see this in the physical world. If someone is drawing up plans for a house and they're building a house, and then they're decorating the house and they hang a picture frame up crooked, how bad of a mistake is that? Not too bad. Not too bad at all. You can just flip it around, or worst comes to worst, you take out the screw, you fill the hole, and you paint it over if it's that bad. What happens if someone makes a mistake in the drawing, the architectural plans of the house? Big mistake, right? It can be a big mistake. It's usually a much bigger mistake than a mistake later on. In the beginning, the energy in the beginning is such that a mistake in the beginning is much more impactful than a mistake later on. It's the same thing if a human being, right? A human being sustains an injury when they're 40 or 50 or 60, a small injury. How big of a problem is it?
The older they are, the worse the injury. It can be.
It can be. And if it's a small injury, then it's a small injury and we recover from it, right? But a small injury at conception can have lifelong consequences, right? Because it impacts the DNA, right? And so we see this a lot, that if you really want to understand the spiritual world, if you understood the depth of the physical world, then you would get sort of a window into the spiritual world, right? So back to this idea that everything is at the beginning. So the rabbis talk about how you can break up the word Bereshit and you'll see three foundational concepts that are kind of like the foundations of Judaism. So what are they? So I've written, you can see over here, on the screen, you can't see it because I wrote it out, but I wrote the Hebrew words as well. I don't know if you can see if I hold it up close, the Hebrew letters. So if you take the words Bereshit, which is Bet, Resh, Aleph, Shin, Yud, Taf, and you mix it around, you come up with three words, three phrases. One of them is Yirei Boshet, which means fear of God. The second one is Yirei Shabbat, right, which is about Shabbat. And the third one is Brit Aish. Brit Aish means the covenant of fire. And this is referring to Brit Milah. Why? Why would these three, and it's interesting because you all came up, when I asked you the question initially, you all came up with very good answers, and yet I don't think anyone, yeah, we had God, we had the one God, which was someone came up with. We didn't really have the idea of fearing that one God, and we didn't yet, no one else also came up with Shabbat or Brit Milah. So why would these three be so foundational in Judaism? And let's break it down one by one. Why would fear of God be such a foundational concept in Judaism? And when we talk about the word foundational, it's not just that it's an important one, but if we look at it as like a foundation, meaning that this is kind of what everything rests on. Why would it be such a foundational concept?
I struggle with that one. I really have never been able to, I don't know, fear of God. Maybe it's just how it's, yeah.
I love that you I love that you struggle with it. I love that you brought that up, because what does it mean to you, fear of God?
I mean, on one hand, I can see that like it can, like a parent is keeping the child aligned, like kind of on the right path. So in that terms, I can like understand it, but I also like management by fear. Like I don't think that's healthy.
So if I can, I think you brought up a very good question, which is, what does fear of God even mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think of it as awe more than just fear, like not fear of punishment, but basically the fear meaning that God is in charge. And if you don't fear, if you don't have any respect, it's kind of like a healthy respect that who's in charge. Because if you don't acknowledge that God's in charge of the world and in charge of your life and in charge of everything, then why are you bothering to even do the Torah? That it's kind of like the basis of he commanded it. So if you're not going to respect or acknowledge the commander, then what is the point of doing anything that he tells?
Because they're doing it from love as opposed to fear. I think that's what Jenny's saying. Is that
Sorry, Jessica, I didn't hear. Do you want to?
Oh, and we had talked about this in a class. We were in this room. I don't remember which class it was, but we talked about looking at fear versus love and coming from fear versus love. And so I agree, like Gira is awe, but there is something about when you're coming from fear, it feels it doesn't have the same, you don't feel warm and fuzzy about it as I can't think of the right word for it, but coercive. It feels almost coercive. Or a good example would be a friend of mine who's no longer religious said that he was tired of feeling like the piano in the sky was going to fall down and squish him.
What?
Piano in the sky. If if this and this and this didn't happen, the piano in the sky was going to come down and squish him. That's how that person viewed Yira. I
That's
don't,
fear.
that's fear.
That
That's
is
not awe.
fear.
That is
That
fear.
is fear. And so, I mean, I guess the first question we have to answer is what is fear of God? And look, there is a level of fear of God, which is a fear of punishment, right? That if I, and we have to understand what's behind it as well. So let's try and dissect what it means, right? Like if I don't do X, Y, Z, God is gonna take away the cookie, right? Or God is going to punish me, right? If God is kind of like, and I think the struggle that a lot of us have is that image of like God as this mean guy in the sky who's looking out for us, and the minute we step out of line, he's going to beat us back into line. And I think I don't think that's not a correct assumption. And we did do the series of classes when we did the 6 constant mitzvahs. We really did a deep dive into it, and it actually it's not on the podcast anymore, but it was on the podcast. So but the idea really is that God created us, and he created each of us for a mission and a purpose, and a unique mission and purpose. And God is going to hold us accountable for becoming who we need to become.
That's the word.
Right? And we there's different, what is it, why does God punish us? Why would God punish us?
To correct us and get us back on the right track, because otherwise it's kind of like when you say you're the foundation, if you're a little off, you're gonna like shoot the arrow. So if you shoot the arrow and you're already off, it's gonna be way off. So it's kind of like if you're starting in this direction and you're supposed to be going there, he kind of steers you back.
Right. So there's, yes, Nina, were you going to say
Well,
something?
You might want to finish and then I'll ask my question.
So there's a rehabilitative purpose to punishment, right? There's different reasons why a person could get punished, but one of the big reasons is to wake us up, right? How often do when things are going great, do we stop and think and saying, oh, I wonder what message God is sending me? Not so much. Sometimes, but not so much. When everything's going run of the mill, we kind of think. But when something happens that didn't quite go according to how we wanted, very often then is when we sit up and we're like, oh, I wonder what's going on, right? There's other reasons as well, which we're going to go into them, but
So 2 things.
yes, Nina.
One, I don't remember, like, my brain is just foggy with this. Some class, and I feel like it had to be with you, but nothing long ago, something during Yontif. Is it really punishment? Or is it what our destiny, like it's the path? Like things that happen to us. Is it really punishment, or is it just trying to steer us in different ways? For us to learn certain things to fulfill what we're supposed to fulfill. The other piece, how does Judaism look at this? Like, I manage this one insurance company, and they're all born again Christians, and they just, when they woke up, like they thanked Jesus for waking them up, and it didn't matter what they did during the day because that was their path.
So Judas, okay, so you're asking 2 very good questions, and I really appreciate they brought the first point up, because the first point is, and I try and always add this as a disclaimer whenever I talk about difficult times, challenges, etc., is there are many, many, many reasons. In fact, I believe there are 8 different reasons why bad things happen, to why people suffer, why we go through challenges, etc. Punishment is only one of them. Right. At the same time, we have to be aware that Judaism does believe in the concept of reward and punishment. Mother Teresa and Hitler do not end up in the same place, which I think is something that we can be grateful for, right? There is accountability for what we do. And Judaism talks about reward and punishment. So there absolutely is this concept of reward and punishment. At the same time, we don't know when something happens why it's happening. We don't know that it's a punishment. The only thing that we can say to ourselves and we can ask ourselves is, what can I learn from this? I don't know why this happens. Sometimes we do, right? You know, someone crosses the road without looking both ways and they get hit by a car, like, you know, that's negligence, right? It's like that's not a punishment, it's just God's created the net world, and if you don't, right, like it's he's not going to step in and create a miracle if you don't do your due diligence. But generally we don't really know why things happen, but we can still learn from it then, right? So that was question number one. Question number two, I think, really talks about helps us as well, is that absolutely not. Judaism does not believe that everything that happens to us is. Judaism believes that we are active partners in our lives, right? That we have, you know, there's so many different concepts, right? Like there's something called mida keneged mida, which means that the way that we behave is the way that we get treated, right? So we are kind and forgiving, generous and forgiving. God treats us in a generous and forgiving way, which means that we have an active partnership in our lives, right? We're not just whatever happens, happens. It's not, as far as I know, it's not a Jewish concept that. Yes, there are things that are out of control that happen to us, but you can't just sit at home and say, oh, whatever happens, happens. However my mortgage gets paid, it gets paid. However my health gets looked after, it gets looked after. No, God put us in this world, in a natural world, and we have to live in that natural world. You have to take care of your health. You have to try and earn, you know, money. You have to treat other people well. You have to invest in your relationships. You have to do all these things and live in this world. At the same time, we also have to recognize that there is a God that is directing the world, right? Someone can do everything in their power to live a healthy lifestyle and still get sick. Does that mean that they're sick because they didn't look after themselves? No, both things are true. We have to do what we can, and God is in control of our lives, right? So that person can get sick, many reasons why. Yes,
So-
Nina.
It's like hard for me to grasp part of this. It's like there are some bad people in this world and so many good things happen to them. And then there's these really good people in the world and bad things happen to them. And so I just forgot the other piece I was going to ask, but it's hard to grasp some of that.
And you're in a good company, right? Because Moses asked God this question. He said to God, explain to me why bad things happen to good people, right? And God, what was God's response to him? What God's response to him was, he said, you can't see the front of me, you can only see behind me, right? Which means you can't necessarily understand at the time. It could be many years later we can understand. It could be in the world to come we'll understand. But it's a hard question to understand because it is a hard question. And at the same time, we have to understand that that contributes to our free will. Because if every time we did something good, we got rewarded, and every time we did something bad, we got punished, it'd be hard, it'd be a bit of a no-brainer to do the right thing. It'd be a bit like stupid to do the wrong thing if, you know, every time you say a not nice word, you know, something in your house would come crashing down, right? Like it's a bit of a no-brainer, right? So yeah, it makes it too easy. So that is part of the free will, and it's a very hard question to understand. Maybe at some point we can do a little bit more discussion on, you know, why bad things happen. But yes, were you going to say something, Jessica?
Sort of.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so we're looking at the three different ways, like the three different permutations of Bereshit, right? And as we're looking at it, we have fear of Hashem, Shabbos, and Bris Milah. And it seems that there's an assumption in those three of knowledge of Hashem, which is an interesting thing. Like that's assumed before you even Bereshit. There's an assumption of knowledge.
Yes,
I mean Hashem exists prior to Bereshit.
So is that
it's a question. I don't know. I'm just looking at this like as roots, and it when I think about, okay, what is the root of Judaism? Sorry, this is like way before you even get to these three. We talk about what are the roots of Judaism, and my thought was the same thing that somebody said, which is there is one God. So in my world, that means that the only thing that exists is God. Okay, great. That would be foundational, so that should be included within Bereshit. And it's not, there's an assumption that that's even, you don't even have to get there. So Abraham's entire like chiddush to the world, that there is only God and that's it, existed even before any of this other stuff, and is beyond foundational.
So it's interesting because we often think, and yours is a great question, and I think we'll answer it once we understand why fear of God is foundational. But I just want to say something, because we often think that what Abraham brought to this world was this idea of theology, right? That there is one God. It's not actually true, because Adam was created by God. Adam didn't believe there was one God. Noah was, had a relationship with God. God told him, what Abraham brought to the world that was unique was this idea that you can use the physical world to become spiritual. Before then, we're either physical beings or we're spiritual beings. And spiritual beings, like, they went up on a mountaintop and they devoted themselves to God. This concept, which is, by the way, is a very Jewish concept, that we live rooted in this world and we elevate every single action that we do, was what Abraham brought to this world. And by the way, it's a Jewish concept, and it's a much harder concept, because it's much easier not to talk bad about other people if you're not interacting with other people. When you have to live with people and be nice to them, much harder, right?
True. So clear.
Thank you. But it's that is what. Okay, let's try and understand this fear of God. So this fear of punishment is, there is one level that is a fear of punishment. This is not the fear of God that is talking about here, because that's not enough, right? In order for something to be foundational, it has to be like in the foundations of it, right? So what are we talking about by fear of God? There is this era, right? Which we can translate as fear, we can translate as awe. Maybe awe is better. But this idea, this understanding that there is a God who created me for a purpose. And I'm in awe of that God. I'm in awe of that purpose that I have. And I am afraid of letting myself and letting God down. I took a trip to Israel with a group of families, and we heard from I forget his name now, a member of the elite counterterrorism in Israel and the IDF. And he was talking to us, and he runs a yeshiva for special needs students. He's a father, he's a husband, and he also is elite member of a counterterrorism unit, which means that every time there's a terrorist attack in Israel and most people run for cover, he puts his boots on and he runs to where the terrorist attack is to try and get rid of the terrorists, right? He was even telling us that he actually sleeps with his boots by the front of the house in a certain way, so that if there's a terrorist attack at night, he can literally just step into those boots. Why? Because they calculated that for every second that it takes them to get to a site of a terrorist attack, this is how many people could get killed. And if he doesn't leave his boots in that direction, in that way, this is how many people could get killed. So one of the members of the audience asked him a question and said to him, look, you're a husband, you're a father, right? You've got kids, you run a yeshiva for special needs students, like, you live a meaningful, full life anyway. Why do you have to be part of these things? Why do you have to put your life in danger? And he said, and I think this epitomizes Yirat Hashem, Yirat Shemayim, he says, I live in fear of, after I pass away, after I die, and I come up to heaven, I come up to God, and God will tell me, why didn't you fulfill your potential? And I don't want that, right? That is the Yirat Shemayim that we're talking about, is understanding that I have I have been created by a higher power, by God, and I have a unique purpose. And I cannot let myself or God down by not fulfilling my potential. And I think perhaps that is an answer to your question, Jessica, of why this is specifically a foundational concept. and not the other, because we can believe in God, we can know God, but that's out there, right? In order for something to be a foundational concept, it has to change us. If we can understand it, it changes how we live our day-to-day life, right? If I wake up in the morning and I remember that I have a mission, it doesn't matter if I know what that mission is, but I have a mission. We get out of bed in a different way. And in fact, the Shulchan Aruch, there's a book called The Code of Jewish Law. And it talks about all the different mitzvahs that we have to do. And it starts off with how we have to wake up in the morning. Did you know that? There's rules about how we have to wake up in the morning. Does anyone know how we have to wake up in the morning?
Like a lion.
Yes.
Yeah.
How did you know
I
that?
don't know, I just know that.
Yes, yes. We are supposed to wake up in the morning like a lion. I know, sorry, I should have given this a disclaimer because it's an intimidating mitzvah, right?
I
We're
think about that, yeah.
we're supposed to
every
wake up in a
morning.
lion, like a lion. Yeah. Why? Why? We're supposed to wake up with strength and vitality. How do we do this? Is by understanding that we have this mission, and I'm afraid to not fulfill my mission. And it's so much more of a deeper thing than I'm afraid I'm gonna get punished. I'm gonna let myself down. I'm gonna let God down. I don't know if anyone has ever had that experience where you kind of have let someone you care about down. How does it feel?
Not good.
It feels awful, right? Right. So that's the fear of God that we're talking about. In fact, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, when he was at the end of his life, he's on his deathbed and he's surrounded by his students. And he wants to give them some parting advice. They want to learn from him. They know that he's going to pass away soon. And he tells them something which at first sounds like wrong even. He tells them, I want you to have as much fear for God as you fear other people. What do you think when you hear that?
Well, that's a lot.
Although his students were surprised because they thought, hold on a second, we're supposed to fear God more than we fear other people. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was like, you're right, you are. But the reality is that we mostly, we're very nervous about, you know how like you're having a conversation with a family member and then someone knocks on the door and the tone of your conversation changes because like there's someone and you don't even know who it is. It could be a complete stranger. It could be like a canvasser or, cleaning the gutters or whatever, but a complete stranger, someone that you don't even care about. But all of a sudden, like you talk nicely, right? So why? Because we are very conscious of how are we afraid that the other person is going to punish us. What are we afraid of in the moment?
What others think of us.
What others think of us, exactly. We don't want them to see anything less than the best version of ourselves. And that's what he was telling them. He was like, imagine if you lived your life the whole time with that level of I don't want anyone to see anything but the best of me, right? Even in private. Would that impact our actions? Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, so once we have this awareness of God, right, and awareness of our unique potential and our mission, and that awe of I don't want to miss out on fulfilling my potential.
Sorry, Gila?
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit? What is the term bullshit? What is that, the aspect of Hashem that it's using that word? I mean, clearly it's convenient because it's the letters of Bereshit, but what is that aspect that's represented in bullshit?
That is a very good question, and I don't know it. So I have to
Google it.
I've never heard that term.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
As
it's not like you're
referring
also
to-
Shem or whatever, like. however
Right,
they do it.
there's 80 names for God, but I've never heard that one before.
I'm gonna have to look it up. And okay, Bosh's Hebrew meaning. I don't know. I'm gonna look up because when I'll go back to the source of where I got this from and I'll look it up there and then I will post it on the WhatsApp group. So if anyone's not on the WhatsApp group, I can add you to it so you can do it. But that's a great question. Thank you. Okay, we'll come back to that one. So once we know what keeps us astray, what leads us astray? Because yes, I can almost guarantee this, right? You're all inspired right now. Something's gonna happen tomorrow or the day after or the thing, and you're not gonna be your very best version of yourself. Or maybe I should talk about myself, right? I know that's gonna happen. What happens that leads us astray?
Life.
It's tiring.
Life, it's tiring. And what is
Desire.
desire?
Convenience.
Usually there's like underneath, like when we say life and it's tiring, why is it tiring? It's tiring because we have a desire. There is a desire that crops up. Like if, for example, I can be so inspired never to talk bad about another person. And then I have this delicious piece of gossip to share, right? And it's just the temptation is feels too hard. And it gets exhausting because we have to constantly fight that, right? So sometimes what leads us astray is our temptations, our desires. Now, what does Brit Milah signify?
Our covenant with God.
Our covenant with God, and it's specifically done on the reproductive part of the body, because that is the part of the body that has that's like signifies passion, desire, temptation. And it's a physical reminder that Jewish males walk around with from when they're babies the whole time, to remind themselves that what Judaism requires is to do what's right, even when it means sacrificing on our desires and temptations, right? That we become the master of our desire and temptations, not that our passions rule us, but that we rule our passions, which, by the way, is what Abraham brought to the world, right? Abraham was the first person who was given the mitzvah of Brit Milah, and Abraham was the person who understood that the real way, right? The real way to service of God is not by isolating yourself on a mountaintop and just studying Torah and just praying all day, but it's living in this world, right? And that's what we do as Jews, right? Friday night we take a cup of wine or alcohol or grape juice or something, and we sanctify it. We take food and we make a blessing on it, right? We take all the physical things, we take our relationships. Do you know how many mitzvot there are that are pertain to our interpersonal relationships? How we think about other people, how we talk about other people, how we talk to other people, how we lend money to other people, how we lend things to other people. Like every aspect of our interpersonal relationships are governed by Jewish rituals. Why? Because relationships are such a huge part of our life, and they can be a huge part of joy and connection and love, and a huge part of stress and strife. And there's so many laws that govern how we take this part of our lives and we elevate it. That is what we do as Jews in this world. We live in this world and we elevate it by the choices that we make. And that is what Brit Milah signifies, is this physical reminder. And interestingly, does anyone know why it's a mitzvah for men and not for women?
Because men are born imperfect and women are born perfect.
I'm not sure how to break this to us all. We're also not perfect.
We are born perfect, but men aren't. So
We don't need the physical reminders that they need, because we have a little bit more physical reminders without having to be reminded.
So interestingly, there's what's called a physical energy, a female energy in the world, and a male energy, right? And a male role in Judaism and a female role. And it's a much bigger discussion. We should do it at some point. But just to know at this point, like the male role is much more of the keeping the memory alive. And the female role, incidentally, is much more of actualizing that role. We see this in, for example, the birth of a human. The male contributes some DNA, and the woman takes that DNA and she nurtures it and nurtures it and nurtures it until 9 months later you have a full human being, right? So we see, again, it's the physical world analogy for the spiritual world, and that because the male role is to keep the memory alive. That's why they have the mitzvah of to study Torah just for the sake of studying Torah. Women have a mitzvah of studying Torah in order to live an inspired Jewish life. So that means Jewish law and classes like this and anything that helps you connect to your Judaism a little bit more is a mitzvah of studying Torah, which by the way is a lot. But the men have this mitzvah Brit Milah because it's a physical reminder that we are born imperfect, and our job is to make the world a little bit more perfect, right? To rule over our passions, to become the master of our passions so that they don't rule us, but we rule them.
It's a lot.
Yes, it's a lifelong job and it's exhausting and it's rewarding as well, right? Because I think one of the things that frustrates us so much is when our desires and passions rule us instead of the other way, right? When we let our temptations, whatever area they are, right, to be comfortable, to whatever it is, that whatever the desire is, when we let it hold us back from becoming our best version of ourselves, that frustrates us. So it's a lot, and it's rewarding as well, because when we're able to overcome our initial desire to do what's right, it feels incredible. Am I right? Yes, I see some nods. Yes.
This is probably a whole different class, but I just like really, if it's okay, I just like feel like I need to share.
Yes.
So I guess when I was a little girl, I'm one of the few older women here. People communicated and treated people, it seemed, with more respect. And as the world evolves, and now we have computers and life is so different, I think there's, in general, not just Jews, I'm not saying Jews, but in general, people are not treating each other as well. And the other piece is, it's amazing, like, I believe that Hashem really looks after Israel, even though all these things are happening. But it's crazy for this small country to keep, God willing, please, keep surviving.
It's
And
nothing short of a miracle.
right. But why to the Jews? Like, I mean, I know I look at it at one side of it, that we're setting an example, but it's really hard to digest. Like,
So I think that
We
I
had
think
that discussion, why the Jews, like, did we talk
we
about
did
that?
it on
Yeah.
Rosh and Rosh Hashanah, and I think the next one is my answer your question. Okay, so what about Shabbat? So I'm gonna actually give you that answer because we're coming towards the end of our class time.
oh my God.
So it's interesting. The Talmud says that for someone who keeps Shabbat, they're not going to be able to tell a lie on Shabbat. What on earth does it mean? What is Shabbat about? Why do we have this day of Shabbat?
Because God commanded that.
Absolutely, God's commanded us.
It's well, it says it's supposed to remind us that God created the world.
Yes, so whenever Shabbat is mentioned in the Torah, it's always mentioned in relation to 6 days of a week you shall work, and on the seventh You shall rest as a testimony that we believe that God created the world in 6 days and created Shabbat on the seventh day. And really, an interesting law about Shabbat is that someone who's not Jewish is not allowed to keep Shabbat, right? They can do most things, right? They want to be kind, they want to give charity, they can do most things, but keeping Shabbat, no. They can't keep a full Shabbat.
Even on their Shabbat day.
If it's not on Shabbat, then it wouldn't be considered things. But for example, someone's going through the conversion process. What they'll tell them is they have to start keeping Shabbat because you can't go from not keeping it to keeping it. It's just too hard to get into the habit of doing it. But they'll tell them to break it in one small way, right? So switch on a light. If do one small thing so that they're not fully keeping it. Why? Because, and the analogy that's given is, imagine if there's a couple that have an anniversary and they go out for dinner, and an acquaintance stops by and pulls up a chair and joins them for the dinner. What would you say?
Kind of rude.
Yeah.
It's rude, and it's inappropriate, right? It's one thing if they're out, whatever, in the grocery store or whatever, right? And they pop in, they say hi, but this is their special time together, right? It's not appropriate for someone who is not in that special relationship to join. And that's what Shabbat is. Shabbat is one day a week where God says, we have a relationship, right? We have a relationship. And one day a week, it's for you to come and spend special time with me, right? So that's what Shabbat is. Shabbat is taking that knowledge that there is a God, taking that knowledge that God has made me for a special purpose, and upgrading it to knowing that we have a special relationship. And in conclusion, we have these three sort of foundational concepts in that are hinted at in the word Bereshit, and I'll follow up with you on exactly how it's hinted at in there. And that is that, number one, a fear of heaven, an understanding, an awe, right? An understanding and an awe that God created me for a purpose, and I don't want to let myself and God down, right? I don't want to not fulfill my potential. The second thing is understanding that it's not enough to just know that I want to fulfill my potential. I also have to understand that in order to fulfill my potential, I am going to have to become the master of my passions, right? I'm going to have to learn how to control myself so that I can do what's right, even if it means giving up and doing something that feels good in the moment. And the third thing is to recognize that we have a relationship with God, right? Everything we do in Judaism is about our relationship with God. Prayer, it's about talking to God, building that relationship. Shabbat is about that special day that we have with God. And we have to continue to build and develop and nurture that relationship with God. Any questions, any thoughts, anything that you want to share?
Well, I'm still in the same place. Where, does anybody else think that that's an easy thing to do?
What year
What
is
to
this,
do,
Shannon?
Which part of it? I would say that for me, just in the last 20-something years since I started my Orthodox Jewish journey, it's a very slow, incremental, acquired thing. It's not something like where I woke up one day and all of a sudden, I was connected to God and everything and that was going on in my life was about God. But the more, whether it was a challenge or a positive thing, the more I would ask God to help me, get through it, acknowledge that it was from Him, guide me. If I'm constantly thinking that way about things happening in my life, whether it's something my kids are doing, something with work, something with an accident, whatever it is, it strengthened my emunah in my relationship with Him. So then my fear, it's not so simple. It's a complex thing where you're doing something and then you think, wait, I'm at this level now. I'm not at that level. So if I do this, if I eat this non-kosher, whatever it is, or I say this thing, God is holding me to a higher level than I was before I learned all this stuff. So I feel like God is watching me and he's watching me individually, that I'm holding accountability to him outside of whatever other people are doing. So it's not gonna just happen all of a sudden.
Jenny, are you saying that you're having a hard time with the idea of fear, like this idea of fear in general?
No, but just like, well, I think I'm trying to process like I mean, when you were talking, it was like our physical mirrors the spiritual. And then it just started to hit me like, yeah, I don't know. I think I need to process
so
it a
much
little bit
for
more before I
coming.
can really like verbalize it. I don't, but there is a struggle and like, I feel like I go down. Like I'm so scared to actually be realized that I keep myself down, and not only to my relationship to Hashem, but like everything. Like maybe I am not worthy of achieving that. I don't know.
So like
But
600
it is
chairs.
great idea
It's
to, I get it.
yeah.
This is,
get
so it's interesting.
So I can't allow myself to like let go and have that relationship with Hashem because I don't know.
Can I,
But
can I
I
ask a
get-
question? Yeah, sorry, you go
Very
first.
quickly, I think I understand you completely, because if it is punishment, I don't want to go there. I just don't want to be considered to be punished. But I think what I learned, maybe it's wrong, but to fear not to live to your full potential, it's different. It's like at work, you have a goal. Yes, to achieve whatever you are doing in certain time, you are working hard on it, and you're afraid that you will not keep the timeline, so you are working at your like abilities. At least this is what I would
So what's
think.
interesting, and I think that this might be what Jenny's saying, and if I'm wrong, just tell me, because it's something that I was working through on Rosh Hashanah, like I'm doing a lot of intention work. And one of the things that I kept coming back to is when I set a goal, like I know what my potential is. I have a good understanding. This is what I'm capable of in the world. And if I put that out there, I am destined to fail because I self-sabotage, because for
Right.
some reason I don't feel like I'm worthy to reach that
But
potential.
what I
600
was-
out there. I
right,
say
yes.
it. I made you say it.
But what I was
Yeah,
talking is
exactly.
not
Like
my
it's too
personal
big,
goal,
too big.
like, oh my god, because I will not,
I don't think I
be personal
Yeah.
goal.
And
But if it is
I'm not going
it's
to.
your
I'm not even gonna
corporation goal,
because then it's like
Right.
this is when
When it comes from extrinsically, when it comes from someone else, and I think that that's why it was,
I do know.
intention work on Rosh Hashanah, because I don't have an extrinsic, like, I'm self-employed, so it has to
Yes.
come from me. If it's coming from me and it's a big goal, I will there is something there that I feel like I am not worthy of hitting that goal, and I will sabotage until yeah.
It's almost like the bigger and the loftier it is, the less likely I'm going to want to do it.
But in the
But if my
conversation
goal
we had
is
today,
to
it was like.
work it, do
the
a goal like,
fluctuation,
or
leave
work,
it,
or my goal is
leave it
to
happen.
get to the grocery store, like, okay, I can do those kinds of goals.
Yeah.
But to live up to my full potential, like, that is so
No, to
intimidating, I'm gonna.
Yeah, it's like, I can't do
We're
that.
gonna talk about this next week. We're gonna do a class on self-sabotage next week.
Can I just respond to that?
Yes,
I did
please.
Sabora for many years with this rabbi in Israel, and like the whole
Rabbi
beginning.
Niven?
Rabbi Niven.
Yes. love.
So in the beginning of the year, meaning Elul, you make an Elul plan, and he has this thing, it's a chart, and you're literally setting goals for it's 15 areas of life. So it could be career, character traits, learning, children, relationships, like everything. But he goes, set your goal of what you want to do, but then set what's called a minimal goal, meaning a minimum amount that you're gonna work on each thing. And then he says, after you go through this whole thing and you have your minimums and then you have your ideal, then you set your year direction, which is the thing is, if you work on this one thing, like you concentrate on that one thing, that's your main thing. Everything else he says kind of goes on what you call low burner. Like you do a little bit of effort on the others, but if you do this one thing, it'll raise everything up. So for example, I had all these goals, but my big challenge for a few years or several years was figuring out how to sleep well at night. So if I'm not sleeping well, I'm not gonna have a good relationship because I'm gonna be aggravated. I'm not gonna get anything done because I'm gonna have to take naps because I'm tired, so the sleep thing, once I got that figured out, raised everything up.
Mhm.
So you can't overwhelm yourself with
It's
all
not even
these
an over,
things.
yeah, it's not even an overwhelm. It's I'll use it, I'll just put it out there. I set a very, very big business goal for myself this year. Like very big. And I put it out there and I said, I'm gonna say it out loud, because if I say it out loud to my group, that they'll hold me accountable. And what I noticed, and I had this conversation with my managing broker, going into Q4, was she's like, you're not even a quarter of the way to that goal. And I'm watching you and you're doing the things and you're you are keeping yourself. You are getting in your own way. Because for whatever reason, you've decided that you don't deserve this.
Okay, but
Like,
then
See,
the
I
next
get to the
question
point where I won't
is-
even set that goal.
well,
Yeah.
that's where I am
Like,
this year.
And I
I
want
know
to ask,
Wait, but then
yeah, and I want to ask a
the
question.
physical mirrors the spiritual, so
Right.
if that's where you're at physically, are you having spiritual struggles?
Oh, that's a whole other conversation. You have no idea.
But I want to ask you a question.
Here's something that.
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
go ahead.
With my son's therapist
It's
today,
insane,
actually,
right?
about his anxiety and, how he's operating in school and so forth, and, there's that aspect of perfectionism.
Mhm.
And if I'm not gonna be perfect at it, that raises my anxiety and then I can't perform and I'm gonna fail, so I won't even try. And, she said one of the approaches that has worked with kids is to say, set your goal and then try to do it badly. No to fail. Try to fail. Try to do it badly. Because if you know you're gonna do it badly, then you don't fear failing. But if you're trying to achieve this goal and you're trying to be perfect and you're trying to get so high, it's intimidating, it's self-sabotaging. So do the sabotage, but do it consciously. Towards, like you said, towards that intention. Like, here's my big goal, but here's my little goal.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna try to shoot for that little goal and I'm gonna try not to do it. I'm with the intention that it's okay that I fail because my goal is to fail. But I'm working towards that ultimate intention.
Yes, work in progress. You are moving somewhere. Maybe you achieve or not. This is why I was talking about corporate goal. You don't really care if you will achieve or not, but you are working hard to
Yeah.
do it.
And he also said, well, the Niven thing, if you're setting this big goal for yourself, he says certain things, especially mainly character traits, they say that it takes the entire lifetime to change a character trait sometimes. So you can't say, I'm gonna be all of a sudden a super patient person and not get impatient at all. You have to say, okay, instead of being impatient 10 times a day, I'm gonna be impatient 8 times a day. So you have to, you have to set a goal that's reasonable, that you can do day to day and is incremental.
Yeah,
Because
it
if you
is
can
the
do
work of a
something,
lifetime.
yeah,
It's
but if you're
not-
doing an
and-
incremental thing, it can't be something like this year I'm gonna do this. It has to be today or every day this week, I'm gonna spend 10 minutes working out. You can't say all of a sudden I'm gonna go from 0 to an hour working out.
Mhm.
So you have to set that small one, but as you get into it, then you're gradually going to get closer to the goal and build it, but you can't look at just the results. You have to see where is your progress.
And sometimes I think it's good to fail. Like in
Say
achieving
all
of
the
your
people
goal.
who've been very successful have failed over and over again.
Yeah.
Well, and then that's
Because
the
you
concept of like, I'm
understand
gonna work
more.
out 10 minutes a day. I'm going to try to fail to meet that goal, I'm gonna only do 5.
Well, we're going to do a deep dive into self-sabotage next week. But I do want to leave you with a question. And the question is it that we become more aware of our potential and therefore it feels like a bigger gap?
Yes.
Or is it that we are afraid, right? Because do you understand what I'm trying to say? So think about it.
Well, no, that's the WhatsApp. You're what everyone's gonna say.
Yes.
Will you put it on the WhatsApp again so I
Yes.
don't forget?
Well, that's
Whatever
what, I mean, it's
questions
kind of
are.
comparing someone that's just starting to become like aware of being Jewish, like what that means, to someone that's been doing it for a while. So, you know, you almost like envy the person that's like, oh, I'm gonna start being more religious. I'm gonna light Shabbat candles every week. And you think, wow, that's so like, for you, that's like probably, and most people in
It's a
this
little
room,
bit-
it's more simple. But then, when you get to the point where you're doing all these mitzvot and then you're trying to get to like, it's gonna be harder. It's not, you're always gonna be setting harder goals, so you can't,
But
keep it
everybody
too
has
easy.
different
Jenny, can you put the
potential.
question that you asked in the group and then I'll respond with that?
Yeah,
'Cause I-
I don't remember what I
I
said.
seriously didn't remember it. I don't
Okay.
know what
What
it
are
is.
your,
But see, that's my piece
I'll
that
put it
I
in.
have a hard time with, that I feel like we just have to be good people, like, and I know that sometimes we have to try, but like, to do a mitzvah to be rewarded, I have a problem with that. I think we just need to be good people.
but the Torah tells you how to be a good person. So like, whether it's your relationship with
No, but I'm
God
saying people,
or
some
with people, it's all in the Torah.
Oh, we have to do a class on reward and punishment as well.
think that, oh, if I do all these things, then good things will come to me. You just need to be a good person. Like, that's how I see it. Like, I don't know.
So, but there's levels,
Are
If
you
you're
saying
doing,
that if you're being a good person, then good things will come to you?
no, she's saying, I agree with you that you're saying that don't do the good thing because then you'll get a cookie. Do a
reward,
good thing
right.
because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
But you know what? Like, there's levels, and if you're doing the good thing because you think you're gonna get a delicious cookie at the end of it, go for it, and then you'll
That's what's gonna
grow.
take you there.
If that's what's going to take you, then you'll be the person who like who does it just because of the intrinsic reward. Like it's kind of like Rav Dessler talks about
Yeah,
this. Rav
so-
Dessler, who talks about
So
yeah,
I'm very sorry.
no worries at all. He talks about it as a ladder, right? And sometimes the step on the ladder to being a good person because it's the right thing to do is too high. So you have to do it for the cookie first and then step over.
I am not perfect. I make major mistakes in life, okay? But I don't get, it's just in my DNA. Like, I feel like I have to be a good person. Like, I want to, it's like, I don't try. I know that's gonna sound
And
horrible.
no, it doesn't,
but
it
it's just
doesn't
like,
sound,
it's
but we all
natural for
have
me.
areas of struggle. We all have areas of struggle.
I'm perfect. I make major mistakes, but it's like, I don't know, like, it's hard for me when it's hard for me to see that everybody's not that way.
But for me,
What were you gonna
it's
say?
very hard not to like everybody probably want to be a good person. Doesn't matter Jewish or not, but to do Jewish mitzvah that doesn't uh, doesn't make sense outside Judaism. This is what what difficult.
We grew up in the whole-
Lighting
yeah.
candles.
But I just
I
wonder-
don't need it to be a good person, to be a, to get a light in my house. It's useless, except that it is a mitzvah in Judaism.
But I believe it's like our journey, and
Sorry.
I'm sure.
No need to apologize.
It's good, it's very good. I feel like mine is probably because of, I had a very difficult life so far. And I think that's what molded me to be who I am, and maybe that's what I needed to become who I am. And that's, everybody's journey is different.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think it's so hard because we live in a society that puts emphasis on, to be a good person, you have to earn a lot of money, right? Like, hold on a second. Why? Right? Like, we do kind of sometimes feel, if I can be very blunt, a little bit superior when we walk past someone who's a drug addict, for example, right? But that's the struggle that that person has.
And so,
So
because of
that's
my,
why
my background growing up, I don't feel better. I wanna go help that person.
Yes, and a lot of us do feel like, unless some,
No, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm saying, and we live in hold on a second. Who says that someone who's struggling with an addiction and is not trying to get themselves out of that addiction
It's not a good person.
isn't a better person
Right.
than the person who's walking past and has a different struggle,
Absolutely.
right? And goes home and yells at his kids, right? Like what makes, we live in a world that has such distorted values, right? The guy who's dressed in the fancy suit and he earns $1 million, we look at him as a success. And yet he goes home and ignores his wife, and that, like,
He has
You know,
affairs.
yeah, exactly, right?
So-
So that's why it's hard for us to understand, like, hold on a second, like, what does it mean that I'm a good person to think? Firstly, it's as Jewish people, as Jewish women, we have to be good people and we also have to be good Jews. But that's building our relationship with God, and it's when we have a relationship with God, we behave, it should change who we are as people, right? Someone who understands and has a relationship with God walks past, hopefully, that person, the drug addict who's homeless on the street, and has empathy for them, not judgment, because the Torah says, don't judge someone else until you've walked in their shoes. And if they've walked in their shoes, they're going to judge them very differently. And you've never walked in someone else's shoes because everyone's different. What are you going to say?
Yeah, and just taking a slightly different turn on the same concept, but going back to what you said almost at the very beginning of the class, saying that, speaking about awe and living up to your full potential. And that, I was created for a purpose, that God created me for a purpose, and I'm afraid of not achieving that purpose. That sort of presumes that you would know what that purpose is, but of course we can't ever know what our specific purpose is. So then that leads to, well, I just have to do everything just in case one of those is my purpose.
We know.
And then
I think we know.
right, and then
I
it's like,
do.
I don't know what my purpose is.
There was a
Tell me. I'm gonna focus on that one.
I thought this is the trick, because
That's
I'm like, which one is my purpose? I don't know.
No, your purpose is to make the right choice in the moment right now. That's
I
it.
saw your text.
Don't worry about your purpose. If you know what your purpose is, great. If you don't know what your purpose is, just worry about doing the right thing right now. That's it. The right thing right now. The next right choice that I have to make. That is your purpose. And you know what? Like sometimes, and I've had this experience in my life as well. Like I thought my purpose was a certain thing, and then God went and showed me that my purpose is something completely different, or that, haha, you think you know what your purpose is, right? Well, welcome to the world where
And
you know,
it changes, it can change.
100%
Your purpose
it changes.
as you're become from like a single person to married to having kids or changing careers, like.
It's a
it doesn't
lifetime.
have
So
to-
that was one thing I was gonna say, is that
Thank you so much, Elise.
as we age, like when you hit 50, you feel like you say and do whatever you want, which you can't, but it's like you see everything you've been through in life. And so then it's harder sometimes. Like it's interesting, like where life takes you.
But I'm thinking, like
It's
the
always-
gentleman you told us about who's, volunteering to go into the terrorist attacks, like he feels that is his purpose, in addition to being a husband and a father and a Rosh Yeshiva and everything else, but he felt like that's not all of it. I also need to fulfill this purpose.
I
Right.
feel like there's
So
there's very few people in the world that can point to it and say, my purpose in life is to be this Rosh Yeshiva and to take care of terrorists. I think that for the vast majority of us, our purpose is to be the best authentic versions of ourselves that we can be, and do the next best thing that is in line with the most authentic and highest purpose for ourselves that we can do, which is making a decision in the moment that is always aligned with that. Like that's what we
You know,
have.
if I can share something honest about myself, is I used to think that my tafkid, my role in this world is to teach and to inspire Jews. The older I get, and especially whatever over the past few years, I don't know if that's I think my role in this world is to kind of say, I have no clue, right? God, you're in charge, right? And to have that sort of humility to kind of say, like, I don't know. Right? Maybe my job right now is to teach this class. And maybe when I get home, I'm going to have a much bigger challenge, which is to be calm with my kids. And I'm being honest here, right? Like, and I'll tell you one thing, I'll choose the teaching of the class 10 times out of 10 over that one. And you know what God wants me to do? He wants me to be calm with the kids, right? Because that's much harder.
You've gotten to the point of like, of that until you were, like, you had to go through being a teacher. This is my purpose.
Are you okay
I
with
have
this?
all this knowledge. And then you could get to the point where it's like, well, I really don't know, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And other stuff as well had to happen in life
Yeah,
that kind of
right.
God was like, you know what, like, and I think that's, if you know, you know, great. If you don't know, I don't think you need to know. It's about making the right choice in the moment. And
What was the
And the
question?
next thing.
Uh,
Sorry?
Does anyone else, the question of the first question is, does anyone else
hit
struggle
back.
with this?
What-
Which is
okay.
like, okay.
What do you
That's
want
the-
me to ask? What did I ask
you guys
that
are
I was like,
table?
you have to?
What table?
Give me a second. All right, thank you so much, Patty Jo, for joining.